Hello and welcome to the SATLUJ TV podcast. Today we welcome back a regular guest to our show, Dr. Bakhshish Singh Sandhu, MD. Dr. Sandhu is a highly experienced and board-certified internal medicine doctor, but as well as being an accomplished medical practitioner, he's also a highly respected and active campaigner for both Sikh rights and the nation of Khalistan. As such, he's the current president of the Council of Khalistan. He's also the president of Khalistan Food for All, a charity established to fund UN food programmes, and he's also the co-founder of Sikhs for Justice, having been with the organisation since 2007. And even amongst this enormous list of achievements, he still had time to author the book Punjab, A Tale of State Terrorism, Persecution, Iconicide and Genocide, available on Amazon and other outlets. Dr. Sandhu, welcome and thank you for joining us once again today.
Thank you, Angus, for having me on your program.
A pleasure as always. Now, Dr. Sandhu, we saw last week various representatives from the Sikh community addressing the United Nations and detailing the persecution and oppression the community has suffered at the hands of India. Now, this forms an important first step for the Khalistan movement to lay out its legal case against India to achieve UN recognition of the concept of Khalistan. So in today's discussion, I'd like to address the more specific detail of how India has indeed been crushing the human rights of Sikhs in Punjab and, of course, other minorities across India. So perhaps we could start, if you could give us a summary of the history of this human rights legislation as recognised by the UN.
Okay, Angus. The United Nations in 1947 decided that there should be a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In order to accomplish that, they established Human Rights Commission in 1947. After about 18 months, on December 10, 1948, they established the human rights in the form of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Means the human rights are universal and they should be obeyed and honored by all the countries who are members of United Nations and even the countries which were non-members. Why it was created? Because after the World War II, a lot of countries thought that minorities are being discriminated, their rights are being violated, they are kept slaves under subjugation, human trafficking, and how we can solve that problem. So they came with this idea, and under the leadership of Eleanor Roosevelt, they finally made a declaration of human rights on December 10, as I mentioned, in 1948. So what are the important aspects of these human rights? So there are 30 articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So we're going to go in detail about how these articles protect and propagate human rights. So the Article 1 to 2 establish the dignity, liberty, and equality. The United Nations says all people are created equal. However, we will later on in the next section of this, we'll discuss how there are no equal rights in India. Second section is Articles 3 to 5, in which it is established that people have individual rights, such as the right to life. And many countries do not honor this right. And we'll come to that also. And the Articles 6 to 11, they refer to the fundamental legality of human rights. The human rights are protected by legal premises. And the Articles 12 to 7 establish the rights of individuals throughout the community. Like, what are the rights of individuals throughout the community? Like, people can move around, they can live in the community. That section covers this right. Article 18 to 21 is called the constitutional liberties, means spiritual freedom, thought freedom, freedom of opinion, freedom of religion. They are covered under the Article 18 to 21. Next is the section Articles 22 to 27. So that is about the economic rights, social rights, cultural rights, standard of living, providing care for the disabled people, and special mentions made for giving care to motherhood and childhood. The Article 28 to 30 establishes how the United Nations is going to help enforcement of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, like the duty of the individual to the society. Just like the society has a responsibility to honor the right of individuals, similarly, individuals also have the responsibility of honoring the societal norms, and thus, when established, it changed the psyche of the whole world. The United Nations will come and stand for their rights, right to freedom, right to free speech, religious freedom, protection from slavery, protection from torture. All these things are, basically envisaged in these articles. As you have seen, that's not necessarily true, how the human rights are being upheld and how they're being violated by the states themselves. The very states or the government which are supposed to hold the human rights, they are the violators and basically carry out decidedly tortures of people who ask their rights. So this is the background of Human Rights Day, that United Nations decided that this is one way the communities which are very small, the nations whose rights are being violated, and they have no other way, then they can basically, under these laws, that there's also right to liberty. Means if they are living in a country that does not honor their rights, then they have right to liberty, and they can secede from the parent nation by right to self-determination. Everything is covered in this.
So indeed, Dr. Sandhu, as you refer to there, this charter has set out a very unambiguous, very clear set framework of basic human rights that all nations around the world have signed up to become part of the United Nations, of course India being a signatory to that. And as you rightly point out, the legal process to the establishment of Khalistan, one of the first things it needs to set out to the United Nations is this defence against India's position. India's position, of course, stating that its defence against the Khalistan movement is that it is a threat to the integrity of its borders, the borders of India as it currently stands. Of course, one of the legal arguments against that is you can only use that defence if you have not abused the human rights of the people within any part of your territory. So, as we're going to discuss now, Dr. Sandhu, we are going to set out clearly how India has indeed breached these UN resolutions, these UN rights set out very clearly in this charter. And I'd like to, if I may, just go through a few of them as examples. If you can give us some examples of how India has clearly been in breach of this set of this simple act of human rights. So if we may, I'd like to start with basically one of the most fundamental ones, and that is the right to life. How do you believe India has breached this basic human right of the right to life?
Angus, that's a good point to start. Right to life. The United Nations Charter gives people a right to life. However, India took the right away. For example, in 1975, Indira Gandhi declared emergency in which people have no right to life. In other words, the police or the military officers, they have right, if they suspect that the person may be doing something or likely to do something, or they think that he could be a threat, he can be shot point blank and they have total impunity. So what happened that in the same time when there was armed struggle going on for liberation of Punjab from Indian occupation, what the Indian government did, they attacked the Golden Temple. 10,000 Sikhs who were just pilgrims, who were not bearing arms, and 10,000 of them were killed. And what happened following the Operation Blue Star, or the attack on Harmandir Sahib, was Operation Woodrose. The Operation Woodrose, the police or the paramilitary forces will go to people's homes, basically drag young Sikhs from their homes, and they will take them to police stations, from the one to the next to the next to the next, so the people or the family members don't know where they are. They will then torture them, which is also a violation of human rights. So after torturing, if they think that the guy is going to die, they will tie his hands in the back and they shoot them from behind. So thus, right to life was taken away from the people, particularly in Punjab. The police, paramilitary forces, and the government agencies had authorized special squads. So why were those special squads created? So these squads, they appeared to be Sikh freedom fighters. They were dressed like Sikh freedom fighters. They will go to people's homes and drag people out and kill them. So Indian government thus tried to create an impression among the people that, look, these freedom fighters, your own people are killing you, and therefore we want to kill them so that they don't harm you. So this was the process the Indian government used for basically taking away the right to life. This is still going on because whenever India determines that a certain person should not live because he's asking for freedom or he's acting politically, they are using transnational repression, transnational assassinations. You have seen the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in his Gurdwara in Surrey, and similarly the attempted but foiled assassination attempt on the life of Gurpratap Singh Pannu, and there are many other examples. So that's how India is taking the right to life away from people and other minorities too, like Muslims and Christians. You have seen in Manipur, more than 500 churches have been destroyed. Many thousands of Christians have been killed. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of Muslims have also been killed in the name of, let's say, in the name of saving Hinduism. So there are 1.2 billion with a B as in boy. They are Hindus in the world, or particularly in India, and they think that the Hindu is in danger. That is the term contrived to justify killing of minorities.
So a very easy one to tick off. The right to life has very clearly been breached. Well, let's go to another one. Let's talk about the freedom from torture and degrading treatment. Now, of course, under the United Nations Convention Against Torture, this is a very fundamental human right. And I think probably I can anticipate your answer, because we've talked about it regularly on our programme Perspectives, that torture does seem to feature an awful lot in the Punjab.
So about the torture. See, United Nations Right to Declaration of Freedom, it prohibits torture. However, under the article United Nations Convention Against Inhuman Treatment, degrading treatment is prohibited. However, India decidedly carries out tortures. It's not that other countries don't carry out tortures. Many other countries also carry out tortures, but India declares and claims itself to be a democratic country. So then, why people, ordinary people, anybody who's suspected, even the religious leaders, they are arrested, they are imprisoned, and they are tortured. And they are extreme tortures, undescribable. Like, for example, they arrest somebody, they basically make some cuts on their thighs, put salt and pepper, then they run rollers on the body of the person, they hang people upside down. And sometimes they tie the hands and they hang the person from the ceiling, and they even apply electrical current to the genitals of the person they have arrested. And then they basically try to disguise the damage done to the body by inserting rods into their private parts like rectum or other like female private parts. They insert batons. They have done that during 1984 November 6th genocide in Delhi. Many women were captured, and some women who went to the police station asking for protection, they were treated like application of extreme tortures, including insertion of rods into their private parts. This is a reason the Sikhs have come to realization that there is no place for them in India. Many examples of this exist. When people are captured, they are taken to police station, then they are tortured, and even their family members are also detained, tortured, mental torture, or extortions. This is how India violates the United Nations Convention on against tortures and inhuman treatments. There are many other examples too, but India, claiming to be a free country, continues to do so. And when the United Nations questions India regarding continuing of tortures, India says, look, we are a very big country, we need more laws. But they have laws on their books. They already have laws on the books which can protect people from being tortured. But they have no will to basically prevent, because decidedly India carries out undescribable tortures, so they can repress people and they can repress religious freedom or political ideologies.
So another area then that I think people certainly outside of India would find quite surprising is when we look at the freedom from slavery and forced labour. But in fact, there is evidence that India has been in fact in breach of this very basic right of freedom from slavery and forced labour. Could you elaborate on that?
See, there is a large population in India which is under slavery. So slave labor is very common, human trafficking. So slave labor, like child labor, is most importantly in construction, is an important example where there's a slavery, child labor, subjugation is still going on. Like for example, in building roads, and mining and other places where there's very little regulation or they are far from the public eye, there's decidedly subjugation, slavery, and the number of slavery, or number of people under slavery in India is close to 18 to 20 million. So it's a very large number, but it's not going down. It's just it's staying there, because the people who are keeping these people as slaves, they're not afraid of Allah, because they know they can pay bribery or they can give some money to the minister or somebody else, so they are protected. So this is how there is no visible solution to the people under slavery and subjugation in India.
And that's, of course, before we even start discussing the evils of the caste system, which is a whole other discussion. But let's move on to another one. And again, one of the most basic human rights is the right to liberty. Again, could you elaborate on why you believe India has been restricting the right to liberty of Sikhs and other minorities in India?
So the same, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, one of the clauses is a right to liberty. So people have right to live in a free country. So for that, people can do referendums, like United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. So United Nations made a rule that people have right to self-determination, and if they are living in a state or a country which does not give them the rights, then they have the right and the responsibility to secede from the country. So what happens? So if India has utilized referendums like attaching Junagadh and Sikkim to its own country, and then when, let's say, Sikhs or Khalistan referendum is happening, so India doesn't like it. So India has tried to stop the referendum ever since the Sikhs have been asking for freedom since 1947. After 1984, the freedom campaign basically was highlighted. It was very strong, and now again, the right to self-determination, right to independence of Punjab or liberation of Punjab from Indian occupation is very strong. But India decidedly violates the right to self-determination, having a referendum, and Sikhs have tried to live in India, but India every time the Sikhs ask for their rights, they answer with the bullets. For example, the Indian government refused to recognize Sikh religion as a stand-alone religion. Indian government has been attacking the Punjabi language. They want to destroy the language so people cannot, let's say, read Guru Granth Sahib, which is written in Gurmukhi. That's Punjabi Lipi they call it, means the script and how the language is written. All these things have been going on. Liberty, if India claims itself to be an independent country, a democracy, then people have right to self-determination, and Sikhs have the same right. But India has done the referendum, but they're not allowing Sikhs to have the referendum. That's basically keeping people of Punjab and Sikhs under slavery.
So the next one I'd like to talk about is something that I guess we take for granted, certainly in Western democracies, but really has been raised into question. Certainly we've raised it in question about India itself. That is the freedom of thought, conscience and religion. Now, on the face of it, we take it for granted, certainly here in the West. And we actually assumed, I think, when we assumed that India was this great democratic nation, as it likes to claim itself as on a regular basis. But there is evidence, and certainly extensive evidence, that certainly the minorities in India are not enjoying a freedom of thought, conscience and religion. Am I right?
So that's a very good point, Angus. So the Western democracies are based on individual freedom and religious freedom. So how is the United States of America? The number one in America, the basically basis of establishment is religious freedom and individual freedom. What happens in India, that India is basically trying to, I want to use the right word, trying to basically eliminate all the minority religions. For example, let's say there are Sikhs in the north, and there are Muslims all over the country, and there are Christians. So whenever the Sikhs want to have their rights, they attack Sikh Gurdwara, Sikh houses of worship. And then they say the Sikhs cannot wear kirpan, means the small, a sheathed sword. The sword that's covered, and now they're putting restriction on that. They are putting a restriction on the ardas, or the language in the Sikh daily prayer. So and then whenever they see the way to stop the Sikhs or repress, they attack Sikh houses of worship. And similarly, in Manipur, more than 500 churches have been destroyed. And at will, there are vigilantes who basically kill or intimidate the people belonging to the minority religions. They destroyed Babri Masjid in 1990 or 1992, and they built a Ram temple on that. And the Supreme Court went along with that. So India is not only the Indian people, but also the Supreme Court, which upholds the rights which are wrong. The Indian Supreme Court does not stand always. Sometimes it does not stand on the correct side of the law. Because it's controlled by Modi government or whoever there was, like Indira Gandhi. She wanted to diminish the power of Supreme Court. So what I'm trying to say, that if, let's say, people are being lynched and people being killed by vigilantes, why the Supreme Court is so soft? against those crimes. Therefore, the right to religion is to basically eliminate people who follow non-Hindu law. So why are they protecting Hinduism? It's the question that India should answer. So let's say now there have been so many allegations against Modi, but the Indians, most of the Indians have, some of them do realize that Modi is doing a lot of wrong things, but mostly majority of the Hindu population does not see anything wrong with what Modi has been doing. They say it doesn't matter what the Indian government does, they are with the government when it's come to repression and persecution of minority religion people. This is what's wrong with Indian democracy. There's no democracy in India other than the label or a false thin veil of democracy on the ground, which inherently is a land of slaves.
So following that same theme then, Dr. Sandhu, of course, one of the facts that we recount on a regular basis is that India sits at 159th position out of 180 countries in the World Free Press Index. In other words, India does not have a free press. And that, of course, then does lead on to another one of these fundamental human rights as set out by the United Nations. That is the freedom of expression. And of course, that's very much linked to what you've been talking about. But can you elaborate and give us further evidence of why you believe in India there is no longer, certainly, any freedom of expression?
See, India takes away the freedom of expression by many ways. One of the ways is anybody who wants their rights, any person who's speaking up against the government, they have black draconian laws, like Unlawful Activity Prevention Act, National Security Act. They used to have TADA, Terrorist Detention Act. There are many laws they have, and they're still making more laws. So they detain people who ask for their rights. There's no freedom of speech. Let's say if 3 Sikhs who were distributing literature on Khalistan, they're arrested and imprisoned to life. Can you believe it? They're imprisoned to life, and sometimes the court, let's say, punishes the police or other people who are taking away the rights. Then the government basically exonerates them, dismisses their charges, and they're free. Now, coming to the freedom of press, there are 2 sections of violation of free speech. Number 1, the people are not allowed to speak, and number 2, the press, they want to give the correct, let's say, situation. They describe what's happening, and if the Indian government doesn't like it, then those correspondents or journalists are arrested, and they are also imprisoned, and that's one aspect. Second thing is, which is more important, is India has its own, let's say, news media, or sports and news media which are pro-Indian governments, and the other news media which are trying to give good information, correct information, their business is shut down. Like, for example, BBC, when it published India, the Modi question, there was a video which is basically banned in India. There were 2 sections of the video. There are 2 sections of that documentary. And after that, the Indian government basically raided the BBC offices in India, and the other news media houses, basically they shut down because the government intimidates people who want to support that media. But the Godi media, means the media controlled by the Indian government, flourishes. And they basically blatant lies. Open 100% lies they tell. I always urge the Sikh nation, Sikh people, and even other people around the world that for a second, you should not trust the Indian news media, because they always give false information. They give you wrong information. For example, when there was let's say, violence outside the Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton, the Indian news media said that the Sikhs attacked. But the true story is no Sikh attacked any Hindu or any temple. It was the other side that the Hindu priest stated that we will distribute swords so Hindus can kill Sikhs. That is in the news. Everywhere you can find the proof of that. Later on, it was found to be correct that the Sikhs did not attack any temple. So, for example, this is the kind of news media it is, and that's why the news media is standing the World Press Freedom Index. India is at number 159 out of, let's say, 190. India's standing has been going down, but just this year, India has reversed by 2 points. Last year, India's number was 161. Now they are 159. So it's not much difference. 159 or 160 is one of the same thing. There is no freedom of expression or freedom of press, and you have seen that the World Press Freedom Index, India is very, very low. And this is not going to change anytime soon.
Now, in my opinion, one of the most important elements, one of the most important rights contained within this charter is a little bit of, I would say, one of the more obscure ones. But to me, in any healthy democracy, it is actually one of the most fundamental ones. And that is the freedom of assembly and association. Now, many people might not actually understand the true depth, the true significance of this simple basic right. But as I said, in a normal democracy, it does ensure that any government is always held accountable because it allows opposition to arise, and it allows opposition to arise unopposed, and this opposition can then exist to hold any government accountable. So of course, this freedom of assembly and association, whilst appearing on the face of it a little obscure, it is very, very important to ensure that any democracy remains healthy, and it is also a mechanism to prevent totalitarianism. So in your opinion, Dr. Sandhu, do you believe that India has breached this particular right of freedom of assembly and association?
That's a very good point, Angus. Yes, India has repeatedly, time and time again, attacks people who are basically peacefully demonstrating. I will give you two important examples. Number one, now you have seen the farmers' protest. When the farmers are protesting peacefully and they, let's say, are blocking the roads, they are attacked upon. Recently, many farmers who are basically protesting peacefully have been injured, and one person has also lost his life. Similarly, in 1955, when Sikhs were asking for Punjabi Suba, they were peacefully demonstrating, and 200 some, maybe more Sikhs were killed from point blank. So Indian government does not want people to ask their rights, and when they ask their rights, they basically simply they have the power. They start killing people. For example, even in the farmers' protests that happened in 2020 and 2021, there were, let's say, basically violation of their rights. Let's say stopping the internet, social media accounts were suspended, internet was blocked, and people were basically attacked with batons and in every which way. Some of them were arrested, they were tortured, and they are still in prison. So this is how India violates the basic rights of people to gather together, right to speech, and right to ask for their rights, and right to assembly. What's a democracy then? If the farmers are standing on the border between Punjab and Haryana, and they are not allowed to go to, let's say, Delhi, then there's a violation of the rights. Let's say, for example, you say the people from New York, they want to go to Washington, D.C. to demonstrate, and if some government stops them, that's what India is doing. India does not want people to demonstrate because they think it's insult against the government and power that people are demonstrating. That's why they stop them.
Indeed, and I would even add to that, of course, the story of Punjab Boris Day and the story of Amritpal Singh, who managed to become that rallying voice of dissent, effectively, and now finds himself residing indefinitely in Dibrugarh jail. So a very clear breach of that basic human right. Now, the final one, Dr. Sandhu, that I'd like to cover today is again, it's just a very basic one, and one that we would normally take for granted in any modern democracy, and that is the right to an education. Explain to me then, please, if you could, why do you think India is likewise in breach of this basic right for education?
See, education is empowerment. When you have knowledge is power. So, especially the communities, in the remote areas, rural areas, they're deprived of education. There may be schools, but the Indian government in 1947, they reduced the budget for public education. They don't want people to be educated. So how the governments of India rule? They want to rule people who are uneducated. They don't know their rights. They don't have any knowledge about how to basically go and take use or make use of the laws and rules and regulations. If they are poor, they have a worry about tomorrow's bread and butter. Then they have no money because they are not educated. They don't know their rights. They don't have economical power. That's why Indian government in many areas keeps people uneducated, keeps them at a very low wages, so they don't have any idea how their rights are being violated. For example, many people in the villages, if you go and talk to them, they say, if you ask them the question, are your rights being violated? And they will say, what are you talking about? Because they don't have any knowledge of how they're being mistreated, how they're kept repressed slaves and under subjugation.
So, as a final question, Dr. Sandhu, just to summarise then, in your opinion, as I said in the introduction, it is important and beholden upon the Khalistan movement to, if it is to establish itself as an independent sovereign nation, to secede from India, it must prove that India has breached the basic human rights of the Sikh community. In your opinion then, to summarise after what we've discussed, do you believe that India has indeed been in breach of the UN Convention?
Okay, Angus. So Sikhs want to secede from India. We want to liberate Punjab from Indian occupation because Punjab is under slavery from India. So what India is doing, they're not letting you demonstrate. They have attacked Sikh religion. They have attacked Sikh language. They basically are forcing people in Punjab to speak Hindi or other languages. So India is occupying Punjab's landmass because India wants to keep Punjab under subjugation, under slavery. They're taking advantage of the grain production. They are taking advantage of the Punjab's water, which they are taking away from Punjab against the violation of riparian rights and the Indian constitution itself. Similarly, they're using Sikh youth as weapons of war. Whenever they war between India or India and China or India and Pakistan, they put the Sikh regiments in front because the Sikhs are good fighters. So they are using Sikhs as weapons of war. They're repressing the religious freedom. They attacked Golden Temple. At that time, they say they want to capture Sant Jarnail Singh Ji Bhindranwale. They captured 37 other Gurdwaras. This was to punish Sikhs, to hurt Sikh psyche and basically break the bone of Sikh religion, but they have not been able to do so. Now they don't have right to free speech, so people in Punjab are not allowed to speak. And the Indian government says in Punjab, hardly few people ask for Khalistan. And we tell them, if you're right, if you think that is true, then let's hold a referendum, and let's hold a referendum in Punjab. The referendum which is signed by both sides means official referendum, and they don't want to do that. And now the transnationally Indian government is repressing Sikhs. They have started the assassination. They are repressing, and even now, for example, I don't know why the Hindutva forces, Indian government and its agents are always against Sikhs. When our Sikhs try to gain some support, they oppose it. For example, Harmeet Kaur Dillon, who has been nominated for the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Liberties, India is opposing tooth and nail her nomination. So anything the Sikhs want to do, they are basically Indian system is anti-Sikh. They are basically, there is existential threat to Sikhs in Punjab and in India and many other places too. So what Sikhs have to learn from that, the Sikhs have realized after 77 years of Indian occupation that they want to take your land away. They have taken your water away. They are taking your religion. They are taking your education. They are taking your identity. So where are you going to go? You need to liberate Punjab from Indian occupation, and referendum is the method. And if you think that tomorrow India is going to stop, it's not going to stop. And the last point I want to make is, freedom of movement. Under the United Nations Human Day and the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, there's a freedom of movement. And India, at its will, stops the visas. Let's say some Canadian citizen who want to go to Punjab, India says, no, we're not going to give you visa. Even now, when you want to apply for visa, they have you sign a certain form. This is basically the attack on freedom. This is the attack on our human rights. And the Sikhs are very strong in pushing for their identity establishment, liberation of Punjab from Indian occupation, and they are not going to stop. Punjab is going to be independent. Punjab is going to separate from India. It's better for India to negotiate with us, and so we can live at peace with each other as good neighbors. There's no other solution to the Punjab problem. Punjab problem solution is independence of Punjab.
And it's very clear that that first legal step has indeed been satisfied by the Khalistan movement. But there, unfortunately, we must leave it for today, but we will be talking again with Dr. Sandhu soon to continue our discussion. Dr. Sandhu, it's been a pleasure as always. Thanks so much for joining us once again.
Thank you, Angus. I appreciate you having me on your program so we can express our views.
A pleasure as always. And thank you for watching the SATLUJ TV podcast. We will see you next time.